Hello YouTube and welcome to part 24, our penultimate entry for our Nuclear Blast Battle Royale. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be taking our very first look into a group I've wanted to check out since the very beginning. You may think that's a bit strange for me to say, but to be honest, it isn't. Ever since I first started doing these videos, I've always wanted to check out Meshuggah. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Here it is. Now, I'm going to give you guys as much background as I can technically get from what we're doing from Meshuggah, because usually how I like to do these videos, if we're only doing them for the first time, I don't really like to go in with knowing altogether too much, although Meshuggah might just be the only one to have the exception to this. Meshuggah was a group that started in 1987 in Sweden, and they are self-titled extreme metal. Now, there's only been a very small hand number of extreme metal stuff we've done throughout the Nuclear Blast Rumble, mostly because most of it's been either like death or a little bit of hardcore. There's never really been what I would call extreme metal. Speaking of, but however, I'm saying that because the description I heard for Bleed is quite extreme in itself. It's essentially the human brain. I think that the premise for the song is about the human brain starting to bleed, and basically, almost like once you've died, and almost the decay of your brain until it's sort of like. I don't technically know if like the brain starts to bleed out when you die, because I believe that your heart could stop, but your brain can technically stay alive for a good another about 15 or so more minutes. And technically, I don't really know what happens to like the brain after once your heart stops. Does it just begin to like shut down, or does it? Because I'm pretty sure the process is going to be a very, very interesting one. Although to be honest, I wouldn't really want to like be a volunteer to demonstrate to you guys what it's like when my brain slowly starts to bleed. Now, what else I would want to say very quickly is that I could have chosen to do the 5-minute version, but I think we're going to do the 7.5-minute version today, guys, because Hake, the drummer for Meshuggah, apparently had to relearn his entire style of drumming just to get this song right, which That leaves me that's fascinating, because now I really want to know what took the drummer to completely rechanging his style specifically for this song. And he did this subsequently just for the rest of the album as well, but it was this song where I wanted to find out what exactly encouraged Hake to change his tune. But I think we're about to find out. So after nearly a 2-year gap between wanting to finally do Meshuggah, we are finally going to do it. So, if you guys want to check out the original video for yourselves, links will all be in the description down below. Let's begin. Bleed in 3, 2, 1, and... Okay, now I definitely know I have to turn this up. The graphicness of the detailing is there's beauty in the details, and I wish there was any other way I could say this, but with how graphic I suspect this is only going to get, I'm feeling a little bit queasy, but also I'm fascinated. It's a bit like watching a nature documentary. But I remember a good few years ago, there was a documentary on Channel 4 about what happens to an elephant after it dies. Now, without actually giving anything away, you're just sort of like, well, what does happen? What does happen when an elephant stops dying? Is there something miraculous that happens, or what happens? It's a bit like even seeing a pregnant elephant in many ways, because the just I swear to God, like, it's just you never would thought about what technically does happen, like inside the elephant's body once it's deceased. And that's only because I think elephants are perhaps one of the last gracious looking animals on Earth. Challenge me if you think there's something out there more gracious than an elephant. What's more, nah, you know what? Let's just continue. Again, I don't mean to like pour. I'm literally now beginning to speculate. Held, I command my hands at will. The end art instruments. Are they literally now describing this guy going through an autopsy, or whatever that shit is called, where they basically they cut into somebody to actually. Quick question I want to ask, and I don't know whether or not that I'm thinking of something different. Like, I'm pretty sure the morgue is just literally the guy who puts you into a mausoleum. But I thought the idea was that the autopsy is that anything that was even remotely healthy, they try and preserve after you. I literally do not know how that works, but then again, I don't particularly know what an autopsy is for. It's not just something for a homicide division to look into. But then again, I'm only speculating because I couldn't necessarily think what's going on right now, whether or not this guy is actually going through an autopsy, or this is literally doctors' last-ditch effort to try and save this man after his bloodshot eyes and this man foaming blood. Mind you, again, like everything else with the song, it's as visually it is about as graphic as anyone could technically rightfully say in this scenario right now. Again, fuck it. They did not disappoint. It was worth the wait. His vision is becoming blurred and it's slowly fading into the distance. This is it, guys. This is his brain. This is his brain powering down, or at least, as far as I can interpret, anyway. Delete. And goodbye, Stadia. Nobody asked for you, so please don't come back. Oh my goodness, my head. My head hurts so much, but that was worth it. That was worth every single day leading up to this song. Anyway, guys, that was Bleed by Meshuggah. Just, there you are, ladies and gentlemen. Gory depictions of literally because this song is literally just about a guy dying, and dying in one of, well, technically there is no finer way of putting it. He's dying through a slow and debilitating death of having a bleed on the brain. And listen, you may have already taken this up by now, but listen, I'm no brain surgeon myself. So I don't really think I can say or even speculate on things about how it came that he had it, like a bleed on the brain, possibly through like an RTC, or maybe some kind of like, maybe a seizure perhaps, or something like that. Is it possible to like, actually I'll tell you what, I'm going to look that up right now, exactly what causes the brain to bleed. Brain hemorrhage is bleeding or around the brain. It is a form of stroke. Causes of brain hemorrhage include high blood pressure, hypertension, abnormally weak or dilated aneurysms, blood vessels that leak, drug abuse, and trauma. In fact, this, when you think about what this guy was saying near the end, where people were gods were scornfully trying to just literally look at his corpse and just determine what exactly is it worth. Maybe this guy was going through some severe OCD shit, and all of a sudden, where he's had to play God, perhaps, and maybe I don't know what I'm speculating that upon. I just literally, it's the only thing that came into my head. Maybe he's realized that the value of his life is worth absolutely nothing, which could have caused him copious amounts of stress and lead to possibly high blood pressure. The realization that he's got to fill the void somewhere in his life, and he could have filled it with drugs. He could have filled it with goodness knows what that can of how that happens. Can you feel a brain bleed? Blood also irritates blood-brain tissues, creating a bruise or bump called a hematoma, which can also place pressure on brain tissue. Occasionally you won't feel initial symptoms. When symptoms of brain hemorrhage appear, they come as a combination of the following: a sudden and very severe headache. You know, that literally could have just been what happened. And you know what? Who's to say it couldn't happen to any one of us? Because they said it doesn't really occur unless you just have a very severe headache. So I could be having a hemorrhage in the brain right now and you wouldn't even be able to tell it. You guys at home, the exact same thing could happen. There's no way of telling, but how severe... In fact, actually, you know what? I'm kind of glad I looked into this a little bit further now, because I've a little bit of a deviation here, but I've got a little bit of a short story I want to share. It happened about... it was like about February 2019. I was on the last bus of the day travelling back home from Newcastle. It was like about just 20 minutes past 8 at night. It was pretty dark outside, and then all of a sudden, and I was sitting at the back of the bus, and then all of a sudden I felt the most unusual of pains. And it wasn't... I don't particularly think it was in my head. I think it was like directly in the middle of my face. I felt like somewhere, like beneath my, like just beneath the layer of my nose, somewhere like almost in the very center of my skull in general, there was some very strange pain that was giving me the most unusual... It wasn't a sharp, painful headache, but it felt like there was something strange going on. I could not describe what on earth kind of pain this was like. This is like... It felt as if like something was jammed and like bones or nerves were being pressed together. That's what the pain felt like. It felt like a constriction of nerves in the center of my head. But I told my parents about this as soon as I got home, that I experienced this very, very strange sort of pain, and the best phrase I could describe it is like being kicked in the face by a mule. That's what it felt like. And I never had that pain ever again. That never occurred to me since, what are we now? We're June, so about 16 months later, and I've never had that pain ever again. I have no idea what the hell caused it, or why the hell it just stopped there, or if it had any everlasting damage, because I generally don't know, because I never looked into this any further, because I just didn't think it was anything to someday that someday some phrases like that are going to come back to haunt me, where I should have acted on the initiative if I thought there was anything wrong. But the thing is that I got home right as day, and tomorrow absolutely fine. I have no idea what the hell, if it was just a headache or whether it was just some. I don't even know. Could even describe what it was like. But here's the thing about that is that was what just happened to me. But what if somebody? How on earth do you go? Well, apart from what they said about drug abuse, which some things I do feel like are very controllable against having a hemorrhage, but who's to say that even if you were to live like a very healthy life, who's to say that it couldn't happen to you all the same? But well, I suppose really it would go under like I've got a better idea. I'm gonna look up trauma and technically what forms of trauma are there. But this is good, guys. We're getting a little bit of an education here. There are 3 main types of trauma: are acute, chronic, or complex. Children can experience various types of trauma, including natural disasters, sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic abuse, medical injury, illness or procedures, community violence, neglect, deprivation, traumatic grief. More items. That's if there's any for like acute, chronic, and stuff like that. Trauma and brain development. Now, this is something that might have some sort of like correlation towards brain trauma. Research has shown that children are particularly vulnerable to trauma because of their rapidly developing brain. During traumatic experiences, a child's brain is in heightened state of stress and fear-related hormones are activated. Although stress is a normal part of life, when a child is exposed to chronic trauma like abuse or neglect, the child's brain remains in the highlighted pattern. Remaining in his highlighted state can change the emotional, behavioral, and cognitive functioning of the child in order to maintain and promote survival. Over time, these traumatic experiences can have a significant impact on a child's future behavior, emotional development, mental and physical health. Now, here's the thing, and I just want I'll click off that for a second. They say that about children, but why are adults, like anybody over the age of 21, not any less prone? I mean, who's to say that, for example, our brains are still not are done with developing? Because I don't technically think that's don't like human brains won't they not develop regardless of what age anyway? Because I don't know, it could be like taking in new information, learning something new about the world. Because isn't that really developing? Because you're getting some sort of like experience or memory out of what you've just seen or heard or tasted, for example. That's a point that I just like want to like consider, but how exactly that and just like what can happen in childhood is that any one of those things could like instill trauma or some kind of stress, especially. Let's just here's a good example. Let's supposing you went through your entire childhood and you never experienced any type of trauma. But what happens if you're, let's say, 14, 15, and you experience your first sign of trauma, regardless of what it is? How badly do you think that would affect your outlook now that you were a victim, or you suddenly realize exactly what was going on? I suppose technically I would expect probably people to say it depends on the severity of the impact is it dependent on that? However, is it? I think it's more or less dependent on how the person takes all of this in, whether it's through like sexual abuse, domestic violence, physical abuse. Who's to say it will have an impact or any at all? But I doubt like it wouldn't have an impact. It would have had some sort of it would have had some sort of impact nonetheless. But how the individual, I suppose, would take this, like, does this become a traumatic experience? I suppose the thing to answer that is that you would have to ask the person in general. But I couldn't think for even one moment that those would be any less stressful or terrifying for anybody of any age, no matter what. Which it makes Meshuggah's sort of like point about how graphic this takes place all the more horrifying, because these are things that happen to real people in the real world. They haven't... What Meshuggah have done, they haven't painted a picture. They've held up a mirror of life. Like, this is you, this is the mirror. And everything you see in the mirror is exactly what you do not want to see. And the reality is that who's to say that I won't come to an eternal end when my eyes are literally beginning to turn red and blood literally starts... My mouth starts becoming a fountain of blood. I know that's a pretty terrifying thought nonetheless, but who's to say... Just because I say it can't doesn't mean it won't happen. And the complete opposite could happen. I could just... Because that's a very, very strange thing as well that I've just considered about it. Because you may have heard me say numerous times before, saying that no matter what, I will eventually die. That is just something I have to learn to accept. But I've never thought about how exactly am I going to die. I mean, I've heard of things like natural causes, but yeah, death is technically natural, but there's got to be more to it than just that. Like liver failure or brain failure or something like that. There's got to be a process that leads into natural causes. Like, you don't just wake up one morning, then about 5 minutes later your kidneys completely stop working or something like that. Now, technically, it's possible for your heart to stop like working, or I don't know. Listen, guys, I'm not a doctor, but it just made me realize that, given the alternatives, I'd much rather, like, let's say, die by falling out of like a 50-story building, because I think like the pain would be so quick. I would die instantly. So I would, if I was to die, ladies and gentlemen, I would rather just like that, instantaneous, no pain, wiped off the face of the earth in 1 second. So I know guys, that sounds like a terrible thing to say, but I would prefer that. If I was to go out, fall out of a 50-story building, at the very least they could say, you know what, they could say that I didn't suffer. As to, like, say, dying in a saw trap, like having like a reverse bear trap where my jaw got permanently ripped open, many people would probably be saying he suffered a lot, something like that. I would not want to go out like that. But with... What on earth was this video? Just, it started off with gory... It started off with gore, then it started off with a realization, and then this guy literally succumbing to his brain off. And we've talked for like nearly 15 whole minutes about trauma and stuff like that. But you know what? If songs could open up a discussion as much as any other, I fancy we'll let them. And you know what? I've been waiting to do this for so long, so I'm gonna make as most of this opportunity as I can. Because if you don't make the most of your opportunity on this earth right now, then what difference would it make if you were to, like, if I didn't make the most of this opportunity, then who's to say that anybody would mourn if I fell out of a story building tomorrow, or I had a brain hemorrhage the very next day? Nobody would care less. It's sad, but true in some respects. So anyway, I hope you guys, and we've just finished this video off on 2112. So anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this reaction video. Please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys thought of Bleed by Meshuggah. Please also make sure to also like and subscribe so you get daily notifications when my videos come out. And I hope to love you guys again for the final part of our Nuclear Blast Battle Royale. Take care. Bye-bye for now.